The round of 16 at Indian Wells was arriving with a specific weight attached to it, and everyone inside the tournament complex knew exactly what that weight was. Alex Eala was about to face Linda Noskova, the world number 4 team from the Czech Republic, and the number that hung over the matchup like a storm cloud was not a ranking figure or a prize money total. It was 11. 11 professional matches against Czech players, 11 losses, not a single win. For a player who had beaten Grand Slam champions and top 10 opponents and filled stadiums across 4 continents with fans who believed completely in what she was building, the Czech Curse was the one stubborn fact that her results had not yet managed to erase. This round of 16 match was the most significant opportunity she had yet been given to change that. If you want full coverage of Eala's Indian Wells campaign and every development across the rest of the season, subscribe to this channel now and hit the bell. We cover every match, every storyline, and every moment that matters in the Eala story. Now let us get into the full picture of what was building in the hours before this round of 16 clash, and why it carried the significance it did. The backstory between these two players stretches back much further than their professional careers, and understanding it adds a dimension to the matchup that the ranking numbers alone cannot provide. In 2018, when Eala was 12 years old, the two players faced each other in the final of a prestigious under-14 tournament. Eala came back from a set-down to win the title. 2 years later, they met again at Roland Garros in the junior draw, and Eala won that one too, in 3 sets. So at the junior level, the record between them ran in Eala's favor. But the professional game told a completely different story. Noskova had broken through first, cracking the top 50 and eventually rising to world number 14 with wins over some of the biggest names in the sport, including Iga Swiatek. The girl Eala had beaten twice in the juniors had become one of the more dangerous players on the tour, known for attacking the ball with the kind of aggressive flat power that gives most opponents no time to settle. The Czech Curse, as it had come to be called, was 11 matches long by the time this round of 16 draw was confirmed. Every Czech player Eala had faced at the professional level had beaten her. Different surfaces, different tournaments, different stages of her career, the pattern held regardless of context. It was the kind of statistical anomaly that can become a psychological burden if a player allows it to occupy too much mental space. And the people around Eala were well aware of that risk. The way to deal with a curse is not to pretend it does not exist, but to prepare so thoroughly for the specific opponent in front of you that the historical number loses its power to distract. Noskova's game presented a specific tactical problem. She is a powerful, aggressive baseline player who likes to take the ball early and hit flat and hard, trying to push her opponents back and take time away from them. On a fast hard court surface like the ones at Indian Wells, that style can be devastating because the pace of the surface amplifies the pace of her shots, giving opponents even less time to respond than they would have on slower courts. Eala had studied the matchup carefully and understood that a slugfest, a straight exchange of heavy hitting with a player who hits as hard as Noskova, was not the path to winning. The ball striking contest was one Noskova was built to win. What the preparation work had identified as the most promising avenue was variety. Not power against power, but spin against pace, drop shots to pull Noskova forward from her preferred baseline position, changes of pace and depth that created doubt and disrupted her rhythm. Noskova is at her most dangerous when the ball is coming through the court. At a consistent pace, she can time and swing through freely. Introduce unpredictability. Make her think about shot selection rather than just executing the same aggressive pattern, and the calculation changes. The tactical blueprint was clear. The challenge was executing it under the pressure of a round of 60 match on a stadium court with thousands of Filipino fans, creating an atmosphere unlike anything the tournament had previously experienced. The return of serve situation was perhaps the clearest statistical advantage Eala carried into the match. Noskova had been struggling with her second serve percentage in recent matches, winning only around 50% of points on her second delivery. Eala's return statistics against second serves were significantly better than average, above 50. 3%, meaning she was winning more than half the points when given the opportunity to attack a weaker second ball. That is a significant enough gap to be decisive across the course of a full match. If Eala could neutralize Noskova's first serve with solid returns, and then attack the second serve aggressively by stepping inside the baseline and taking the ball early, the serving dynamic that Noskova relied on to control points would be compromised from the opening game. The history between the two players from their junior days added a layer that Noskova's camp was clearly thinking about. The Czech player had come a long way since those junior encounters. She had the ranking, the professional experience, and the powerful game that had beaten world #1 players. But she had also lost to Eala twice, when both players were young and the margins between them were smaller, and the knowledge that Eala had beaten her before, even if those matches came years earlier in a different context, is the kind of detail that plants itself in a player's mind during the quiet moments before a big match. For Eala's camp, the junior wins were less important than the current form. She was arriving at this round of 16 having beaten Coco Gauff earlier in the tournament, a result that confirmed she could perform at the highest level on this specific court in front of this specific crowd. The confidence built from that win was real, and the preparation for Noskova had been thorough. The training sessions in the days leading up to the match had been focused and intense, with specific work on the return and on the variety of shot selection that the tactical plan required. By the time Eala stepped out of the tunnel and onto Stadium 1, she had done everything within her control to be ready for what was coming. The crowd that gathered for the match was everything the Filipino community in Southern California and the wider diaspora watching from around the world could produce. Stadium 1 at Indian Wells holds around 16,000 people, and the atmosphere when Eala walks onto a court there is different from anything the tournament experiences during matches involving players without that kind of community behind them. The noise is not just loud. It is unified in a specific way that comes from thousands of people who all feel the same thing at the same moment and express it without reservation. For the fans in those stands, this was not simply a round of 16 tennis match. It was a moment in a story they had been following closely and personally for months, and the Czech Curse was a chapter of that story they desperately wanted to see brought to an end. Noskova stepping onto the same court faced something she would not encounter in any other match at this tournament. The opponent she could see across the net was one challenge. The environment surrounding that opponent was another challenge entirely, one that had nothing to do with racket technique or tactical preparation, and everything to do with the sheer concentrated emotional energy of a community that had decided this match mattered to them on a personal level. The connection Gauff had sent before the match, the single-word message of encouragement, captured something real about what Eala's presence at this tournament had come to mean even to the players competing against her or alongside her at the elite level. Professional tennis players are not given to expressions of this kind without genuine feeling behind them. The tour is a competitive environment where everyone is ultimately trying to beat everyone else, and the warmth that Eala's peers have consistently shown toward her throughout the season reflects something about her character that exists independent of her results. She is liked, genuinely, by people who have every professional reason to see her simply as a competitor. That is not a small thing, and it does not happen by accident. For Eala herself, stepping onto Stadium 1 for a round of 16 match against a Czech opponent for the 12th time in her professional career, the number 11 was simultaneously the most important context of the match, and the thing she most needed to set aside. The tactical plan was clear. The preparation had been done. The crowd was behind her in a way that no opponent could neutralize or plan around. What remained was the match itself, point by point, game by game, executed under the specific pressure that comes from knowing the history while trying not to be defined by it. The Czech Curse had held for 11 matches across years and surfaces and stages of her career. Whether it would hold for a 12th, against a player she had beaten twice in the juniors, on a court in the California desert, in front of thousands of flags, waving in the desert sun, was the question that everyone who had been following her story was asking. The preparation said she was ready. The form said she was capable. The crowd said they believed. The match would provide the answer. In professional tennis, statistical patterns and historical records exist right up until the moment a player does something to end them. Every curse in the sport's history was eventually broken by someone who prepared thoroughly enough, believed completely enough, and executed well enough on the day that the numbers stopped mattering and the match itself became the only thing. 11 was a number. The court was real. The work had been done. And when the first ball was struck on Stadium 1 with the Pine Army in full voice behind her, the only thing that remained was tennis. What happened next would be written into the record alongside all the other matches and all the other moments that had been building toward this point in a season that had already produced more than anyone had anticipated from a 20-year-old from the Philippines competing in the California desert with the world watching, and the history of 11 losses sitting just behind her on every point she played. Subscribe to this channel and hit the bell for every update on Eala's campaign at Indian Wells and across the full clay season ahead. Drop your thoughts in the comments on whether this was finally the match where the Czech Curse ended. We will be covering every moment of what comes next.